Diplomacy front and center. Will President Biden be able to prevent a Russian invasion of Ukraine? President Putin continues to amass troops along Ukraine's eastern border with nearly 100,000 Russian soldiers poised to pounce if Putin gives the order. The Russian president wants Western powers to give him guarantees that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. Well, joining us to provide some insights on this is Bradley Bowman. He's Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Brad, it's good to talk with you again. So what do you think? Is Putin serious? Is a Russian invasion of Ukraine imminent, or is he just calling Biden's bluff here?
Thanks for the opportunity to join you, and thanks for the question. You know, I think NATO and American military planners have to assume the worst. I think it would be negligent not to assume that. It may be that only Putin knows what he's going to do, and he may not even know. At a minimum, what he's doing is clear. He's trying to use military power to get a diplomatic outcome. This is something that Karl von Clausewitz and students of history would appreciate. And it's also something that former Secretary of State George Shultz would appreciate. He talked years ago about the, quote, shadow of power on the negotiating table. And clearly that's what Putin's trying to do here. He's trying to intimidate, coerce, bully Ukraine into saying that it will not be a member of NATO. It's trying to exercise a veto over another sovereign nation state and saying with whom they can associate. So I kind of zooming out, I would characterize it this way. It really is 19th century, if you will, might makes right authoritarianism spheres of influence versus self-determination, rule of law, and territorial integrity and sovereignty. And that's what this is about. The United States and NATO should stand for the latter. And clearly, Putin is in favor of might makes right authoritarianism. And this is where the rubber meets the road.
Well, it's really hard to imagine NATO actually declaring war against Russia if it does invade. But Biden says his team is putting together a, quote, most comprehensive and meaningful set of initiatives to make it very, very difficult for Mr. Putin to go ahead and do what people are worried he may do. What do you think he means by that? Do you think it's concessions?
Well, if we've learned anything about Putin through the years, it is that he will take as much as we give him, and he views concessions as green lights for additional aggression. Let's remember that we have a good portion of the nation state of Georgia, which is currently occupied for more than a decade now by Russian troops. Let's remember that Russia illegally invaded and annexed Crimea. And and there's been many Russian troops supporting a Russian separatist movement in Ukraine. And so this is not just me sitting from afar guessing. We've already seen Russia violate sovereign borders in Europe and conduct aggression. And now he's assembling an extraordinary military force on the border of Ukraine, threatening to do the same. And according to public reports, our intelligence community thinks he might go forward with it. So Ukraine, as some of your viewers will know, is not a member of NATO, right? So an invasion of Ukraine would not necessarily trigger the Article 5 there, that an attack against one is an attack against all, because they're not a member of the alliance. But Putin's trying to extract concessions about them never becoming a member, and NATO not putting forces in Ukrainian territory that he would find threatening. So how's the U.S. respond? Well, we see some tough talk coming from White House. We see talk of sanctions. No doubt Putin doesn't want more sanctions, but whether that's enough to deter this aggression that he appears poised to do remains unclear to me. I tend to think the only thing he really respects in the final analysis is hard power. So if we want to deter another invasion of Ukraine, I think we'd be wise to get additional defensive combat power to our Ukrainian partners.
Brad, how do you think Vladimir Putin views President Biden? Does he see him as strong, weak, resolute? What?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think he probably believes that Biden is someone who's committed to security in Europe, who's committed to alliances, believes in the values of allies and partners, who also wants to spend more time and resources on China. So I think a lot of people in the Biden administration, senior officials, would really like things to be calmer in Europe, be more of a net producer rather than consumer of security, if you will, so that we can spend more time, resource, attention on the Indo-Pacific, where we have a growing threat from China as well. I think Putin knows that. But I wonder whether he will play into that and say, hey, Mr. President, all you have to do is basically put Ukraine on the chopping block, if you will. We've seen in U.S. in history, in European history, when we've fed someone else to the alligator tends not to be satisfied with that. And so I think we'd be wise to look at a little history here.
And just a few days ago, Ukrainian President Zelensky warned that Russia was about to orchestrate a coup attempt against his government. He went public because he apparently possessed intelligence that led him to believe that it would take place within days. Do you believe that Russia may attempt a coup against the Ukrainian government?
This would be completely consistent with what Russia does in Europe. When we've seen Russia conduct political and information warfare throughout Europe. We saw them doing it in Greece in the last year or two. And so I don't know why they wouldn't try to do that in Ukraine. They will do anything at their disposal to make sure that they can control Ukraine. And so I am not surprised at all. I would be surprised if they're not trying to do that. So, put yourself in the shoes of the Ukrainians right now. You have massive forces, main battle tanks, self-propelled howitzers, infantry fighting vehicles, multiple launch rocket systems, short-range ballistic missiles, surface-to-air missiles assembling on 3 or 4 sides, basically in the north and in the east. And in the south, they're actually using Crimea, which is technically still part of Ukraine territory, to assemble this massive force, while simultaneously trying to flip the script and blame it on Ukraine, right? We've seen them use Russian-speaking populations. They generate a fake crisis, and then they use that as justification for a military assault that they want to do anyway. So I would look for Russia to resuscitate these Soviet-era tactics, if you will, that we've also seen since the end of the Cold War. And I think when a beleaguered democracy is threatened by an authoritarian bully, America's interests and values are implicated, and we have to be clear where we stand.
Bradley Bowman, Senior Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you for sharing your time and insights, Brad. We appreciate it.
Thank you.